This 6-year-old beggar girl got spit on by a millionaire, but what happens next shocks everyone. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The sun beat down on the brick streets of Sedona, Arizona, that January afternoon. Lily, a small 6-year-old girl, walked with her bare feet already toughened by the heat of the pavement. Her messy brown hair and simple cotton dress betrayed her humble condition, but her hazel eyes held a sweetness that captivated everyone who met her. In her delicate hands, she carried a bouquet of paper flowers carefully made by herself, red roses and white daisies, all made from old notebook pages she found. It was her livelihood to help her grandmother, Josephine, 72, who could barely get out of bed due to a severe respiratory illness. Main Street buzzed with the typical Saturday afternoon bustle. Merchants hawked their wares, tourists photographed the historic buildings, and locals chatted in the shade of the old trees. That's when he appeared, Theodore Ted Vasconcelos, the most powerful man in the region. Tall, imposing, wearing an impeccable Italian suit despite the heat, the owner of the largest mining company in Sedona walked as if he owned the town. At 58, his graying temples and face marked by deep wrinkles carried a permanent expression of bitterness. Since his wife, Mirella, passed away 5 years ago, Ted had become even more reclusive and temperamental. Lily, who knew the busy times of the square well, saw an opportunity in him. She approached him timidly, extending her bouquet of paper flowers. "Mister, wanna buy one? They're just $5, she said in her soft voice. Ted glared at her with contempt, his cold eyes scanning the small, ragged figure in front of him. "Get out of here, you little stink," he barked, spitting in the girl's face. The spit ran down Lily's cheek, mixing with a tear that insisted on falling. People around stopped, shocked by the scene, but no one dared to interfere. After all, who would dare to confront Ted Vasconcelos? Then something unexpected happened. Lily, instead of running away crying like any child would, took a step forward. She stood on tiptoe and, with a courage that surprised even herself, whispered something in Ted's ear that made him pale instantly. "I saw you last night, leaving that old house near the river, carrying an old chest." The businessman's face transformed into a mask of terror. His authoritarian demeanor crumbled in a matter of seconds. With trembling hands, he grabbed Lily's thin arm and pulled her away from prying eyes, dragging her to a nearby alley. "What else did you see? Who else knows about this?" he whispered, his voice betraying the panic he felt. Lily, even scared by the man's reaction, stood firm. Her eyes met his, and for the first time Ted saw something beyond the dirt and poverty. He saw a strength that disconcerted him. "No one else knows," she replied, massaging the arm where his fingers had left red marks. "I was coming home after selling flowers, and I saw you leaving there." Ted ran his hands over his face, sweating profusely. He pulled a wad of bills from his pocket and tried to shove them into the girl's hands. "Here, take this, and forget what you saw. Never talk about this again." But Lily didn't move to take the money. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want your money, mister. I just want a place for my grandma to recover. She's very sick, can't even breathe right." The businessman was silent for a few moments, his brain working furiously. Finally, he said between clenched teeth, "I have a country house. You can stay there until your grandma gets better, but there's a condition. No one can know. Absolutely no one." That same night, a black car with tinted windows stopped in front of the shack where Lily lived with her grandmother. Josephine, a white-haired lady with a gentle face, was carefully carried into the vehicle, coughing violently. Lily sat next, to her, holding her wrinkled hand. As the car snaked along the dark roads leading out of town, no one noticed the shadow watching them from afar. Olivia, the 63-year-old housekeeper who had served the Vasconcelos family for 3 decades, was returning from her day off when she saw the unusual scene. Her eyes narrowed with concern. In all these years working for Ted, she had never seen him act so strangely. What none of them knew was that this night would mark the beginning of a story that would forever change their lives. In the country house, while helping Josephine settle into one of the luxurious rooms, Lily noticed something peculiar. On one of the walls, partially covered by a heavy curtain, was a portrait. In it, a young man smiled. A smile she had never seen on Ted's face, but that seemed strangely familiar. The Vasconcelos country house was an imposing 19th-century building with thick adobe walls and high windows that creaked in the wind. Located 12 miles outside of Sedona, the property was surrounded by an extensive, unkempt garden where abandoned rose bushes struggled to survive among the tall grass. In the first few weeks, Lily and Josephine rarely saw Ted. He only appeared to check that they were still keeping silent about their presence there. The only person who had regular contact with the two was Antonia, a 55-year-old woman who worked as a cook and had been given express orders not to ask questions and not to comment with anyone about the new residents. Josephine spent most of her time in the room assigned to her, fighting increasingly severe coughing fits. The room was spacious and well-furnished, with an antique four-poster bed and moss-green velvet curtains that filtered the sunlight. Lily slept on a sofa bed next to her grandmother, always attentive to any change in her breathing. One particularly cold afternoon in June, while exploring the silent corridors of the house, Lily discovered a half-open door leading to a dusty library. The shelves went from floor to ceiling, filled with old books that exuded a peculiar smell of aging paper. It was there that she found the first clue that something was wrong. Hidden between two heavy volumes of business law was a photo album. The yellowed pages showed images of two identical boys at different stages of life, always together, always smiling. On the back of one of the photos, a delicate handwriting had written, "Ted and August, 12 years old, Christmas 1977. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Lily quickly close the album and hide it back on the shelf. Through the crack in the door, she saw Ted pass by, muttering to himself. His face had a different, almost soft expression, something she had never seen before. That same night, Josephine had her worst crisis yet. Her lips turned blue as she struggled to breathe, clinging to the sheets in despair. Lily ran through the dark corridors, screaming for help, until she found Ted in his office. "Please, my grandma. She can't breathe," the girl pleaded, pulling on his coat sleeve. To her surprise, Ted did not react with his usual irritation. Instead, his eyes looked different, kinder. "I'll call someone who can help," he said, in a voice that sounded strangely different. That's how Olivia, the housekeeper who had witnessed their arrival weeks ago, officially entered their lives. With her grey hair always tied in an impeccable bun and a perceptive look behind her gold-rimmed glasses, Olivia brought with her not only practical nursing knowledge, but also an aura of mystery that soon intrigued Lily. "Your grandmother needs constant care," Olivia declared after examining Josephine. "I'm going to move in here temporarily." Olivia's arrival changed the dynamics of the house. Under her care, Josephine began to show signs of improvement. The housekeeper had a special way with medicinal herbs and new natural treatments that seemed to work miracles. But there was something else about Olivia. She watched Ted with a look that mixed concern and knowledge, as if she held an important secret. One morning, while helping Olivia organize Josephine's medications, Lily noticed a small notebook that fell out of the housekeeper's apron pocket. Before she could reach it, Olivia picked it up quickly, her face showing momentary panic. "What is that, Mrs. Olivia?" Lily asked, curious. "Just old notes, dear," the housekeeper replied, putting the notebook away carefully. But Lily had managed to see an open page where it was written, "Today he spent 3 hours talking to the mirror." Again, the voice was different. As July progressed, bringing with it an even more intense cold, strange events began to multiply in the house. Objects changed places during the night. Sounds of conversations came from Ted's room when he was supposedly alone. And even more disturbing, there were times when he seemed like a completely different person. On one of those occasions, Lily found him in the garden, pruning the abandoned rose bushes with a delicacy that seemed incompatible with his usual personality. When he saw her, he smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Come, little one, let me teach you about roses," he called in a voice softer than normal. For a moment, Lily almost believed she was in the presence of someone else. The moment of peace was interrupted by a thunderous noise coming from town. Ted blinked several times, as if waking from a trance, and his face returned to its usual hardness. "What are you doing here? Go back inside now," he roared, throwing the gardening shears on the ground. That night, while everyone was asleep, Lily heard a faint cry coming from the attic. Climbing the stairs on tiptoe, she found a door ajar. Through the crack, she saw Ted sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photographs and sobbing like a child. In his hands, he held the mysterious chest she had seen him carrying that fateful night. "Forgive me, forgive me," he murmured repeatedly, but his voice sounded different, younger, almost as if it were someone else. The chest was open, and Lily managed to glimpse old papers and what appeared to be a school uniform folded carefully. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked beneath her feet. Ted raised his head abruptly, his eyes meeting hers through the crack in the door. For a fleeting moment, Lily saw something in his gaze, not anger or fear, but a deep and devastating sadness. "Get out of here!" he roared, his voice returning to its usual authoritarian tone. Lily ran down the stairs, her heart pounding. When she reached her room, she found Olivia standing in the hallway, her small notebook open in her hands. "What did you see up there, girl?" the housekeeper asked in an urgent whisper. Before Lily could answer, a sharp scream cut through the silence of the night. It came from Josephine's room. Lily and Olivia ran to Josephine's room, finding the lady sitting on the bed, trembling, her eyes wide open, fixed on something she was holding in her hands. It was an old photograph, yellowed by time, that had fallen out of a book that Antonia had brought earlier to help her pass the time. In the image, a young Josephine, no more than 20 years old, smiled radiantly next to a man who looked extraordinarily like a younger version of Ted. But there was something different about him. His eyes sparkled with a joy that they had never seen in the current owner of the house. "August," Josephine whispered, her voice choked with emotion and difficulty breathing. "My August." Olivia quickly took the photo from Josephine's trembling hands, but it was too late. The sight of that image had triggered a series of memories that now overflowed like a dam that breaks after decades of containment. "Grandma, who is August?" Lily asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and holding her grandmother's cold hand. Before Josephine could answer, a thud came from the hallway. Ted was standing at the door, his face a mask of horror at seeing the photograph in Olivia's hands. For an instant, his entire body trembled, and his expression changed completely. "Josephine," he said, with a different, softer, almost youthful voice. His eyes, normally hard as stones, were watery. "Is that really you?" But just as it came, that moment of transformation passed. Ted blinked several times, and his usual expression of hardness returned. He snatched the photo from Olivia's hands violently and left the room stomping, locking himself in his office. That night, no one slept in the house. Josephine, after being calmed by Olivia with an herbal tea, finally began to tell her story, a story she had kept buried in her heart for 35 years. August was Ted's twin brother, she began, her voice low and trembling. We met when I worked in the cafeteria of their parents' mining company. August was different from his brother in everything except appearance. He had a kind heart, loved poetry, and spent hours tending the garden of the Vasconcelos mansion. As Josephine spoke, Olivia took her notebook from her pocket and began to take notes furiously, as if she were finally putting together pieces of a complex puzzle. We fell madly in love, continued Josephine, her eyes lost in distant memories. But their father would never approve of a relationship between one of the heirs and a simple employee. So we met secretly in the old house near the river, the same one where Lily saw Ted that night. The girl's eyes widened with the revelation, beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had discovered. Josephine continued, August and Ted inherited the mining company when their parents suffered a car accident. Ted wanted to expand the business at any cost, but August was concerned about the environmental impact and the well-being of the employees. The discussions between them became increasingly intense. At that moment, they heard a noise coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was dragging furniture in the attic. Olivia motioned for them to remain silent and continued with the narrative. I was there the night everything changed, said the housekeeper, her voice filled with guilt. It was my first year working for the family. Ted and August had a terrible argument in the office. August had discovered documents proving that Ted was embezzling money from the company and harming small investors. A thunderclap cut through the sky, making the windows tremble. A storm was approaching Sedona, bringing with it an icy wind that seemed to carry the whispers of the past. That night, Olivia continued, August disappeared. Ted told everyone that his brother had run off with the company's money, but I always knew there was something more. In the following days, I noticed changes in Ted's behavior. Sometimes he acted exactly like August, spoke like him, had the same gentle gestures. That's why you keep that notebook, Lily asked, pointing to the diary in the housekeeper's hands. Olivia nodded, opening the notebook to specific pages. For 30 years, I've recorded every moment in which Ted seemed to be August. At first, they were just small moments, but they increased over time. After Mirella, his wife, passed, it got even worse. Josephine sobbed, clutching the crucifix she wore around her neck. When I saw Ted for the first time in Main Street, after so many years, for a moment I thought I recognized August in his eyes, but I convinced myself that it was impossible. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered and went out. The storm had knocked out the house's power. In the dark, they heard footsteps coming down the attic stairs, accompanied by a voice that alternated between two different timbres, sometimes brutal, sometimes soft. He's talking to himself again, Olivia whispered, lighting a candle. Or rather, he's talking to himself. Lily, demonstrating an unlikely courage for her 6 years, took a second candle and headed for the door. Where are you going, girl? Olivia asked, alarmed. I need to see what's in that chest, Lily replied. The truth is up there in the attic. And now I know why he was so scared when I saw him that night. Before anyone could stop her, Lily was already in the dark hallway, her small candle projecting dancing shadows on the walls. The storm raged outside, and lightning illuminated the house in ghostly flashes. At the foot of the stairs leading to the attic, she stopped. Ted's voice, or was it August's, echoed from above, alternating between angry shouts and desperate pleas. You ruined everything. No, please, listen to me. I didn't want to. They needed to pay, but not this way, not this way. Lily began to climb the steps, each step making the old wood creak beneath her feet. What she would find up there would forever change the fate of everyone in that house. The staircase leading to the attic seemed endless in that darkness. Each step that Lily climbed brought her closer, not only to the top, but also to a truth that had remained hidden for decades. The wind howled through the cracks in the roof, and the thunder made the whole house shake. When she reached the last step, Lily found the attic door ajar. The light from her candle revealed a large room with a sloping ceiling and full of old beams. The floor was covered in scattered papers, as if someone had rummaged through decades of documents in a moment of fury. Ted was kneeling in the center of the room, in front of the open chest. His hands trembled as he held an old leather notebook. Around him, dozens of photographs formed an almost perfect circle, all showing the twins in different stages of life. "Mister?" Lily called softly, taking a step into the attic. He turned sharply, and the girl noticed something different in his eyes. There was neither the usual hardness of Ted nor the gentleness that sometimes appeared. There was only confusion, as if he himself did not know who he was at that moment. "You," he said, his voice wavering between two different timbres, "you look so much like her." "Like who?" Lily asked, approaching cautiously. "Like Beatrice," he replied, now with the softer voice that Lily associated with the moments when he seemed to be someone else. "My daughter." At that instant, hurried footsteps sounded on the stairs. Olivia appeared in the attic, followed by Josephine, who leaned heavily on her shoulder. When the lightning illuminated Ted's face, Josephine put her hand to her mouth, stifling a scream. "August!" she called, her voice barely a whisper. The man looked at her, and for a moment his face lit up with a smile that did not belong to Ted. "Josephine, my love." But soon his expression changed, contorting into a mask of fury. "No, she can't be here. You're ruining everything again." Olivia quickly pulled her notebook from her pocket and began to flip through it frantically. "It's happening more often now," she murmured. "The transition between personalities. It's faster, more intense." Meanwhile, Lily had approached the chest. Inside it, in addition to old documents and photographs, there was a small newspaper clippings album. One of them, yellowed by time, had a headline that made her heart clench. "Vasconcelos mining heir disappears after argument with twin brother." "It was that night," Olivia began, her voice trembling slightly. "I was cleaning the office when I heard the argument. August had discovered that Ted was embezzling money from the company, harming small investors, among them my family," Josephine completed, her eyes fixed on Ted August. "Is that why you disappeared without saying goodbye? Is that why I never knew about the existence of our—" "Silence!" Ted bellowed, his voice again harsh and cruel. But then his face softened, and tears began to run down his face. I didn't know you were—" A particularly loud thunderclap shook the house, making everyone jump. The candle that Lily was holding almost fell, momentarily illuminating a piece of wall that looked different from the others. The girl approached, curious. "Don't go near that wall," Ted shouted, but his voice failed in the middle of the sentence, turning into August's. "Please, they can't find out." Lily, however, had already realized that section of the wall sounded hollow when she tapped on it lightly. Olivia, realizing the girl's discovery, approached with her own candle, illuminating the place better. "I always knew there was something strange about this attic," said the housekeeper. "For years, I heard voices coming from here, even when there was supposedly only one person." Ted, on August, tried to get up to stop them, but his legs failed. He fell to his knees, sobbing, while his hands gripped his hair tightly. "I can't anymore. I can't keep him trapped anymore." It was then that Lily found a small bump in the wood. When she pressed it, a soft click echoed through the attic, and a part of the wall moved, revealing a small secret room. What they saw there made Josephine stagger, needing to lean on Olivia to avoid falling. The space, no larger than a large closet, was organized as a sanctuary. On the walls, dozens of photographs of young Josephine, a wedding dress yellowed by time hanging on a hanger, old letters tied with ribbons, and in the center, an old wooden cradle. Beatrice, whispered August. Now it was definitely his voice, speaking. Our daughter was born 3 months after Ted. You never knew, said Josephine, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. You never knew that she existed, that she grew up, that she became a wonderful woman, that she gave us our granddaughter before. Lily, who had approached the cradle, found inside it a more recent photograph. In it, a young and beautiful woman smiled, holding a baby in her arms. The woman had the same eyes as Josephine and the smile of August. "Mom," Lily whispered, touching the face in the photograph with her small fingers. The sound of something heavy falling drew everyone's attention. Ted August had fainted, his body stretched out among the photographs scattered on the floor. When Olivia ran to help him, a paper fell out of his pocket, an old birth certificate where Lily's full name was written, Lily Vasconcelos Santos. The storm began to subside outside, but inside that attic, decades of secrets still echoed on. The walls, and in the fragmented mind of the man fainted on the floor, 2 personalities fought for control, one wanting to hide the truth, the other desperate to finally release it. No one noticed when the streetlight came back on, dimly illuminating the attic through the only window. No one noticed when the wind stopped howling. Time seemed to have frozen at that moment of revelation, while 3 generations of a family, torn apart by secrets and guilt, finally reunited. "Grandma," Lily called softly, her small voice breaking the heavy silence that had settled. "Why did you never tell me?" Josephine sat heavily in an old rocking chair, the same one that August had used to cradle her decades ago when they met in secret. "How could I, my little one? How to explain something that I didn't even understand completely myself?" Olivia, who was checking Ted August's vital signs, stood up suddenly. "He's murmuring something." Everyone approached to hear the fragmented words that came out of his lips, sometimes in Ted's voice, sometimes in August's. The safe, in the library, the truth, all the documents. The library of the Vasconcelos mansion held much more than dusty books. Behind an imposing mahogany bookcase, Olivia discovered the safe mentioned in Ted's delusions. Her experienced hands, which for 30 years had cleaned that room, trembled as she turned the combination that only she knew, the twins' birth date. With a metallic click, the safe door opened, revealing piles of documents organized meticulously. At the top, a red folder caught everyone's attention. Inside it, detailed records of the investments diverted by Ted over the years, including the names of all the families harmed. "Here it is," Olivia murmured, her eyes quickly scanning the yellowed pages. "The Santos family. Your maternal grandparents, Lily. They lost everything they had invested in the mining company." Josephine, sitting in a worn leather armchair, clutched the crucifix on her neck. "That's why Dad got sick. That's why we had to sell our house. And all this time, more documents emerged from the safe, certificates, contracts, letters. Among them, a diary bound in green leather, with the initials AV engraved in gold. It was August's diary. "Read it," said a weak voice from the library door. Ted was there, leaning against the jamb, his face a mask of exhaustion and guilt. But his voice was unmistakably August's. "Read everything. I can't carry these secrets anymore." Olivia opened the diary with reverential care and began to read aloud. June 15th, 1990. "Today I discovered the truth about the diversions. Ted has been using the mining company for a complex fraud scheme. Small investors, families who have entrusted their savings to us, are being systematically robbed. Among them, Josephine's family. My heart is broken. How can I continue living under the same roof as my own brother, knowing what he has done?" Lily, sitting on the Persian rug at her grandmother's feet, absorbed every word. Her small face showed an understanding beyond her 6 years. Olivia continued reading. June 20th, 1990. I confronted Ted today. The discussion was terrible. He laughed when I mentioned the ruined families, said they were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I no longer recognize my brother. Tomorrow, I'm going to the police with the evidence I've gathered. But before, I need to see Josephine one last time. I need to tell her that we'll be able to be together finally, that everything will be resolved. The housekeeper stopped reading, her hands trembling. This is the last entry. The following night, interrupted Ted August, his voice choked. There was the fight in the office. Ted pushed August. He hit his head on the corner of the desk. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the sky began to clear, announcing a new day. The storm had passed, but its consequences still echoed inside that library. When August fell, he continued, now clearly in Ted's voice, I thought I had caused that I had hurt him badly. I panicked, and then something inside me broke. Olivia took her notebook and began to read. June 21st, 1990, first occurrence. Ted spent the whole morning in the garden, tending the roses as August used to do. His voice was different, softer. When I called him Ted, he didn't respond. Dissociative disorder, she explained, adjusting her glasses. Ted's mind, unable to cope with guilt and trauma, created a space to keep August alive inside him. But Ted's dominant personality constantly struggled to keep August suppressed, becoming increasingly cruel and bitter in the process. Josephine stood up with difficulty from her armchair, approaching the man who was both her lost love and her tormentor. Is that why you sometimes looked at me differently in the street during all those years? Was it August trying to break free? At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Ted's face softened completely, and tears began to run down his face. Every time I saw you, my love, I fought to emerge, but Ted was too strong. Until that night in Main Street, when I saw our granddaughter. Lily, who had approached silently, touched the man's hand. Are you my grandpa? Before he could answer, a noise at the entrance to the library drew everyone's attention. Irasema, the former employee fired by Ted, was standing at the door, holding a folder of documents. I finally found you, Ted, she said, her voice filled with determination. And I brought with me all the evidence of your fraud, including your psychiatric hospitalization records that you tried to hide. Ted's face contorted again into an expression of fury, but this time something was different. The transformation seemed incomplete, as if the two personalities were fighting for control simultaneously. Get out of here, he shouted in Ted's voice, but immediately his expression changed. No, please, stay. I need to fix everything. Olivia quickly positioned herself between Irasema and Ted August. You don't understand, she told the former employee. The situation is much more complex than it seems. But Irasema was not alone. Behind her, several people began to enter the library. Former employees, defrauded investors, families who had lost everything. Among them, faces that Josephine recognized from her youth, neighbors she had seen lose their homes and life savings. The rising sun began to penetrate through the tall windows of the library, illuminating the surreal scene that unfolded. Amid the impending chaos, Lily remained holding her grandfather's hand, as if her small presence were an anchor keeping him connected to reality. Grandpa, she said softly, you can fix everything now. You don't have to hide anymore. At that moment, something seemed to break definitively within Ted August. His entire body trembled, and when he opened his eyes again, there was a clarity that no one had seen in decades. The sunlight now completely flooded the library, illuminating every face present that historic morning. The silence was dense, charged with decades of grudges, secrets, and injustices. At the center of it all, a man who was two, fighting his final battle for control. Ted August staggered to the antique desk, leaning heavily on its polished surface. When he raised his face, everyone could see his eyes were different. There was no longer the cruel hardness of Ted, nor the confused softness of August. There was something new there, a mixture of both, as if the two personalities were finally merging into one. "For 35 years, he began, his voice wavering between the two timbres before finding a balance, "I lived as two men, one built by fear and guilt, another trapped in the shadows of his own mind. But now, looking at all of you, at my family," he looked at Lily and Josephine, "I can't maintain this division anymore." Olivia quickly opened her notebook, her hands trembling with emotion. It's the first time in 3 decades that the two personalities seem to be talking to each other, instead of fighting for control. The man continued, now firmer. "Ted created an empire through lies and manipulation, trying to suffocate the truth that August wanted to reveal. But the truth has a way of coming to light." He walked to the open safe and began to remove more documents. "Here is every fraud, every diversion, every family harmed. And here," he took a separate folder, newer, "here is all the money that was diverted, invested secretly for all these years. The original amount multiplied several times." A murmur ran through the library. Irasema took a step forward, confused. "You kept the money?" "August never allowed Ted to spend what was stolen," he explained. "The August part always knew that one day he would need to return everything with interest. Every penny will be returned to the families, starting with the Santos family." Josephine covered her mouth with her hands, tears running down her wrinkled face. Lily squeezed her grandfather's hand tighter. "But there's more," he said, turning to Olivia. "You kept not only my actions in your notebook, but also proof that not all of the Vasconcelos fortune came from scams. August, before being suppressed, had made legitimate investments, discovered new deposits, developed more efficient mining techniques." The housekeeper nodded, flipping through her precious notebook. "Half of the current fortune came from these honest investments. I kept separate records, always hoping for the day when the truth would come to light. And now," he continued, "that part will be used to create a development fund for Sedona. Schools, hospitals, environmental preservation projects, everything August always dreamed of doing." An elderly gentleman among those present took a step forward. It was the former gardener of the mansion. "But what about you? Who are you now?" The answer came after a moment of reflection. "I am no longer just Ted or August. I am both and neither of them. I am someone who needs to fix 3 decades of mistakes, starting with my family." He knelt in front of Lily, getting down to her, eye level. "You, my little one, were the catalyst for all of this. When you confronted me that night in Main Street, your courage awakened August in a way that nothing else could in 35 years. Is that why you brought us here?" Lily asked. "Ted brought you here to hide his secret," he replied. "But August, I wanted my family close by. Every time you smiled, I saw your mother, Beatrice. I saw the girl I never got to know, the daughter I never got to raise." Josephine approached, leaning on her cane. "Beatrice was so much like you. August, she had your smile, your kindness. She knew about you, knew that her father had disappeared defending what was right. That's why she became a lawyer, defending people harmed by large corporations. How did she—" He hesitated, the pain evident in his voice. "A heart condition," Josephine replied softly. 3 years ago. But she lived a full life, August. She was loved, she was happy, and she left us the greatest gift of all." She looked fondly at Lily. The sun was already high in the sky when the lawyers began to arrive. During the following weeks, an intense restructuring took place in the Vasconcelos mining company. Every family harmed was located and compensated. the development fund began to operate, transforming Sedona. But the greatest transformation happened within the country house. With professional help, the man who was once Ted and August began intensive treatment. The personalities did not merge completely. The doctors explained that this rarely happens in such long cases of dissociative disorder, but they learned to coexist in harmony. The garden, abandoned for so long, returned to bloom under his care. Lily spent the afternoons there with her grandfather, learning about each type of rose, while Josephine watched from the porch, her heart finally at peace. Olivia continued. In the house, no longer as a housekeeper, but as part of the family she had always been. Her notebook was turned into a book, telling the extraordinary story of a man divided in two by the weight of guilt and remorse. On a particularly beautiful spring afternoon, almost a year after that stormy night in the attic, Lily found her grandfather sitting on the garden swing, staring at a distant point. "What are you thinking about, Grandpa?" she asked, sitting next to him. He smiled, a smile that was now unique, neither Ted nor August, but something entirely new. "I was thinking about how the truth, no matter how much we try to hide it, always finds a way to come to light. Sometimes through the small hands of a courageous child." Lily rested her head on her grandfather's shoulder, and together they watched. The sunset painted the Sedona sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden, the white roses that August loved so much mingled with the red ones that Ted preferred, creating a two-tone carpet that symbolized the union of two souls so long separated. The gentle wind brought the sound of the church bells, and with it the promise that sometimes the most painful stories can have endings full of hope. Not perfect endings, as the scars would always remain, but endings that prove that it is never too late to start over, to forgive, to love. And somewhere, who knows, Beatrice smiled, seeing her daughter in the arms of the father she never got to know, but whose love and courage ran in her veins, and now in those of her little Lily, the girl who, with her innocence and determination, managed to heal wounds that seemed impossible to close. The story of the Vasconcelos brothers would become a legend in Sedona, not for the scandals or the fortune, but as a reminder that our true wealth lies in the ability to face our mistakes and choose a better path, no matter how much time has passed. And what about Lily? Well, she continued selling her paper flowers in Main Street, not out of necessity, but out of choice. Each flower now carried a small message of hope, reminding everyone who crossed her path that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply to tell the truth, even when the whole world seems to want to hide it. In that country house, where secrets and guilt once reigned, now echoed laughter and stories. And in the garden, the roses continued to bloom, white and red side by side, a silent testament that even the most divided souls can one day find their way back home.